Hello, Star Wars fans, and welcome to another episode of the Star Bros podcast. Thank you for joining us as always. Thank you to our new listeners that are here. We are excited that you're here, and we are here to continue the conversation around the Book of Boba Fett. And this episode will be titled "The Revenge of the Fett," because I got some real revenge vibes from this past episode.
Oh,
So
yes.
can't wait to dive into that one. I am joined as
Yes,
always
sir.
by that voice that you hear, my bro host, Jan Solo. What?
And I'm joined as always by the other voice that you hear, my bro host, Ben Skywalker.
I mean, it was the fact that you like chimed in like right before I introduced you. It was like that voice that you're hearing is the guy that you know is always on this
Oh,
thing with me.
okay. I see what you say now. That
Yeah,
makes
yeah.
sense.
This thing we call a podcast. Um,
Yes.
how are you doing, bro?
I'm doing great, man. I was just thinking about, I had a snack before we jumped on.
Good call.
What, I was thinking about like what the media must look like on Tatooine and what the media must look like on Mos Espa.
You mean
Do
like the
you think
Hollow
that they
Net or
cover,
what?
is there like a newspaper that covers the comings and goings of Makshais and of Boba Fett and whoever the daimyo is and all that stuff? Do you think that there's like a tabloid or something that everybody reads when they're just hanging out and uh, saving up money for the watermonger?
I like
Do you
the
think that's
idea
a
of a
thing?
tabloid specifically, just like something that completely makes crap up and
Yeah.
uh, it says this week in the Book of Boba Fett, and maybe that's where the
Boba Fett sleeps in Bacta tank. Oh, that's a lie.
yeah. And that's where Black Chrysanthemum was just like, "Ooh, here's my opportunity," or something, you know. He's reading
Yes.
that in the
Yeah.
tabloid. I don't know, man. Maybe when as soon as he said that, this is weird, but like I just got this crossover between like the Martyrs map from Harry Potter, and like you could
Yeah.
see where Mokshais and Boba Fett were all at all times or something like that. It's like that seems like a bit of
Oh,
a
I love
security
that.
issue, but what that would be kind of cool, right?
That would be kind of cool. Yeah, if anybody's out there writing fan
There you
fiction that takes the form of a tabloid of what's happening on Mos Espa, or in and around the deal makers and the movers and shakers of Mos Espa, I want to read that. So let
totally.
us know. But yeah, I like it. It's interesting when, and not to get too ahead of ourselves, but it's interesting to think about like if you live in this town and Jabba's gone, and now what's his name?
Bib Fortuna.
Bib
Yeah,
Fortuna,
yeah,
right? He's gone. Like, what are people saying? What are they tweeting about? What does like the newspaper look like in that town? Just something I was wondering about.
yeah.
Um, when I should have been wondering about other things that are more constructive, adult type topics like paying bills and worrying about that type of stuff. But that's what I was thinking about, and
You
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm good. I gotta get to. I'll answer that question in a second. But you said something really funny in the chat this week, yesterday, right? And I don't use it very
Every
often
day.
every day. You said something like, "Was that gonk a little bigger? Like, was that an XL gonk?" And I just, as soon as you said that, I was like, I don't do this very often because I hate when I get it, even though I deserve it a lot. I sent you that nerd gif. I was like, gosh, only nerds would think about this. Was that like the gonk that goes on the bottom of a Tesla or something?
I don't know. And I wasn't body shaming the gonk. I wasn't judging it anyway. But I thought it was like an XL, like maybe like a little extra battery for I don't
A
know,
little bit
for
more juice.
whatever. Yeah, like that's like the American supersize gonk
Yeah,
droid.
this is the super size me. What's the McDonald's? I don't go there enough. I guess like the different menu sizes, like
Yes.
super size me.
Yep.
You gonna
Yep.
need a lot of
Yep.
juice
So,
today.
yep. But you definitely called me out for being a nerd, and I totally accept
It,
that because that felt appropriate after you know sending you guys a specific text message about whether or not it was a bigger gonk than normal.
it was funny though. I loved it, and it just it merited that gif in that moment just because that's a very nerdy thing for us all to think. But maybe there's
Yes.
some truth to that. Um, and we'll get to Gonk again in a second because there is another reason why we'll need to bring up. But to answer your question, I'm good. I went back to Michigan this past weekend. We went to a hockey game and brought my daughter to that. So, um,
Awesome.
and it was like the best of both worlds. They scored a lot. They didn't let any goals in. So, 1-4-0.
Wow.
So, that's the best kind of game you can hope to attend. So, had a good time, and then it was white knuckle on the way home, and a few snowstorms that we got up here. It has been cold here in the Northeast, people, very
Oh
cold.
yes.
Even in Michigan, it was
Yep.
cold, but then I found out like at home it was like in the single digits. Last night I looked up and it was 10 degrees, felt like 2 degrees as I was walking my car out of class.
Hmm.
It was so cold. So fun to
These
watch.
are for anybody who's listening from another part of the world. These are like -15, -20 degrees
Celsius.
Celsius days, and even colder at night. So
Is it that
yeah, it's
low? I
been
don't know if it's that low. Maybe negative
well. We've
15.
we've had
Yeah.
we've had some. I think it was Saturday night while you were in Michigan with the wind chill. It felt like -20 Fahrenheit here.
Uh,
So things were just sort of freezing solid. A friend of mine was up in Vermont, which is not that close to here, but in the grand scheme of things, also not that far. And he went outside with a room temperature glass of water for like 5 minutes, and it started to freeze. The edges of it were frozen
that's
when he went back inside
crazy, man. Wow.
because it was that cold.
Wow.
So
Wow,
a
wow,
little
wow,
bit
wow, wow.
warmer than that here. Yeah, but not all that much better. So we're I don't think we're expecting any snow anytime soon. We had a little bit here and there,
Yeah,
but yeah, it's full on
it
winter.
is. It's crazy, man. But I don't know. We'll see it through. We'll get the spring. We got some exciting things to talk about in the spring in a second. That's the best segue I can do right now into our next segment.
Nice.
How's that?
Well, that's really well done. All right, yeah, let's get to our first segment, whatever the heck that segment is called.
News from across the galaxy. Wow, there's a lot of casualties on that one. Poor guys. Uh,
Yeah.
who are these guys, by the way, that every time that we bring up the news, something bad happens to them?
Something bad happens to him. I don't know. I hope there's enough back to tanks to go around for all those guys.
I hope so too. And while they're recovering, I'm full of segues today. They they sit there and play on their PlayStation or Xbox because this spring, see, there was a reason for that segue there.
Wow.
This spring, there will be a lot of Star Wars to enjoy.
Yes.
Let's start with the first piece, which
Hmm.
is we finally now you remember for like at the beginning of this podcast, we were talking about like when is that Lego Skywalker saga coming out? We have a date, and just kidding, they just said indefinitely postponed, and we almost forgot that it was even happening.
Yep.
Well, guess what? We got a date again,
We got a
and
date.
I think we're done. It's not moving.
I,
What do
I,
you think?
I think this is going to stick. It seems definitive. Like they didn't say like the spring or the month. They said April 5th, 2022. This game is coming out.
April 5th.
Yep.
Great day to look forward to. Uh, it's the what do you call it when it's 4-5 instead of 5-4, which is May the 4th. Maybe they did that on purpose.
Maybe they did that. Yeah, for the different
Ah,
markets around the world. I didn't even think of that. That is a good call. Um, we were talking before though. All the major retailers have not as of this morning
yeah,
not caught on to the news. Like if you go on Amazon to pre-order, it still says you're going to get it in 2023. But
yep,
let's take them on their word. Like you're probably going to have this game in hand in April. Um, I don't think there's going to be another delay here. So very, very exciting. You can unlock 300 characters.
yes.
300.
And the DLC packs that they usually save for later stuff you can buy right out of the gates.
Oh,
So all like, and I think some of the packages were like Rogue One and Solo and my Mandalorian was part of that season 1 and 2.
ah,
There was like a trooper pack or something, so you can get all of those right out of the gates, those expansion character packs. So, and I
so
don't know if
cool.
that's part of the 300 or not. Maybe we can look into that, but holy cow, that would be really cool to collect all those. I don't believe there are stories attached to those. It's just the characters. So I hope they add the stories later on.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think I thought that was their original intention. Like this is such a big game for them, and that's
Yep.
why I think the delays were justified and
Oh yeah.
uh, a good call to make. Like get this game perfect because this was the first Lego game they came out with and it wasn't perfect
Hmm.
but like it was great for the time. It was so fun. It was what started everything. But like as you look back on it, it was glitchy. It didn't have as many of the shortcuts figured out that they have today. Like they're gonna put the best Lego game out. And I've played a lot of those Lego games. Like they've made a
Me
ton of
too.
progress in making it better over time. So I cannot wait to see like them nail the home run with this. I'm excited for it.
I,
What
I'm
about you?
I'm excited, and I got really excited at the 300 character thing because that means they can do some
Yeah.
like deep cut characters. Like going back to Gonk, like
Yeah,
if you're gonna have 300 characters, one of them might be Gonk. Like
it is. It is.
is it?
Yeah. So
See
that
that
was why I said I want to bring it back up.
that so now I'm clicking pre-order right now.
Right now. You're just like Amazon. I'm probably. I don't know if I'm going to do GameStop, Amazon. You can get some. If you do the deluxe edition pre-order, you can get one of the vendors. I think it might be Amazon. You can get a little minifigure of Luke with the blue milk mustache.
Oh
That
boy,
looks funny. I think if you go to GameStop, you can get a little mini X-wing Lego kit.
cool.
Uh, I don't know which one to choose, but I can only choose one because I'm not spending $70 twice just for little
True,
mini figurines.
true.
Um,
And
and two
I'll
games.
I'll probably just go for the convenience. So the gym that I go to is right next to a GameStop, and every time there's
Mm,
a big new Pokemon game coming out with some type of exclusive thing or whatever, people camp
you're
out the
first in
night
line.
before. I'm not
Oh,
first in line, but I
that's
go
your
to
other
the
fandom now.
I go to the gym early in the morning and I see them like this time of year, like wrapped up in blankets and sitting in a chair. Not just
Yeah,
Pokemon, but like whatever, like all these exclusives. People turn out for that type of stuff, and I'm not
yeah.
sitting on a lawn chair for 12 hours waiting
No,
for. So I'll just get it on Amazon or something.
I'll beat it. I'll try to beat everyone to the click before I beat everyone to the door. That's I don't know.
There you go.
That's how I think about it. No, but so with this, they came out with a great game trailer, like so you can see the gameplay a bit more, and you can really see how they've upgraded this game from previous iterations of Lego games, whether that's the Harry Potter or the Lord of the Rings or whatever, or the Force Awakens and Avenger storylines, where they've continually made progress. Like this one, you saw like you can do combos, you can do like special tricks. It's not just like the same hit A and that punches them, hit
Yeah,
square and that jumps. Like I don't know if I got those buttons right, but point being, like it's going to be a little bit more interactive and involved with the storyline. I don't know what they're going to do with the dialogue because remember they for the Force Awakens they did like original dialogue and got the actors back to record. I got a sense that there will be some dialogue in this that will be pulled from the movies, but nobody came back to like re-record new lines or anything like
oh,
that.
I see.
So we'll see what happens there. But the gameplay itself looks great, and that's where I saw the Gonk. Like you can be the Gonk, you could be a Tusken Raider, and you can do special moves based on who you choose, which is I
Yes.
think what they did with the Marvel ones. Like every
Yeah.
character had a different, like you could do their superpower with that character, which was a great feature.
Yeah, I love it. I'm excited for it. I am going to click pre-order, and then we'll be talking about it, I'm sure, once we get our hands on it and play a little bit.
Yeah, totally. It might take us months to get through it all, but
Probably.
I will be spending my time with that.
Awesome.
Um, anything else on that one?
Not on that one. What else do we got?
Well, if you are done playing the video game in the spring and you're still recovering and you're back to tank, then you can turn on Disney Plus and watch the Bad Batch season
The
two.
Bad
Because
Batch.
apparently, as Omega might say,
Yep.
uh, you can sit down and watch the Bad Batch in spring because it's official. I think we already knew this, but like there was a publication, I think Star Wars Insider, where it like specifically called out that Bad Batch season two would be coming in the spring.
Hmm.
My guess is similar to last year when it came on May 4th. So
Yep.
if you had to pin me down and say when do we think we're going to get it in the spring, because that's like 3 months worth of time, I guess is May 4th.
That seems
Something for Star
perfectly
Wars Day.
reasonable. Yeah, I
Yeah,
think that's probably spot on. I'm excited for that. I think that's going to be great. So we're going to be wrapping up. Let me think. We're going to be wrapping up Book of Boba Fett in February. Is that right?
yep.
In
Because
February?
I keep forgetting, is it 6 episodes or 8 episodes?
I think it's
It's
7.
or seven in between. Okay,
So this week was 4. Yeah. So
so four.
so later in February we'll be wrapping up Book of Boba Fett, which means you poor souls and us will have to go like a whole month without something brand new from Star Wars, except the comics. We'll get a Star Wars
Oh yeah,
comic or comics in March, and we'll talk about that in a second.
yep.
But that's just how spoiled we are these days. Like we've got awesome new content coming out constantly. and
And we're still supposed to get Kenobi and Andor. So
Andor, and then just beyond the horizon in 2023, probably, I don't know, end of 2022, maybe Mandalorian. I think 2023.
I don't think they've even started filming yet, or if they have, it's like just at the beginning stages. So that could be pushing it, but it's probably going to be early 2023 is my guess.
Yep.
And then you got the Ahsoka series right behind that,
Oh,
or right
right,
around
right.
that.
Oh my gosh, so spoiled. But
So
um,
spoiled.
speaking of Mandalorians, do want to say, as always, this episode is going to be all about the last two chapters of the Book of Boba Fett, and maybe we'll go back to chapters 1 and 2 a little bit. So it's going to be chock full of spoilers, and I say that, pause the podcast now if you haven't watched chapter 4. I think we're getting the Mandalorian in chapter 5.
You are jumping right to the end. Look at you. Yeah. Uh, we let's just. I don't
Let's
know if I want to
table
talk.
that.
We haven't even gotten to segment 2 yet,
We
but
haven't. We
we will
haven't.
have to talk about that.
Yes. But yes, Bad Batch coming. Very excited for it. I'm assuming that it's the same personnel involved in season 1, which delivered. So yeah, we
Yeah.
will buckle up.
Filoni.
Yep.
Yep. And a Filoni Aol. Is that what they say? Aol? I don't know. It's just I see
Yes.
that shortcut everywhere.
Yes.
So what's the last thing that we want to chat about as part of the news?
The last thing that we wanted to mention that we don't talk about enough is just the awesome collection of comics that are coming out on a regular basis. Primarily the Star Wars, the High Republic comics that you and I have been covering, along with our bro host Chris Ryan's picked one up this week
Yep.
for the
For
Broaxium
me.
channel. Yes, and which we do from time to time on the Broaxium YouTube channel. Which every Wednesday when Star Wars comics are dropping, you can expect to see a brand new quick shot. And we've been covering, I've been covering Marvel's The High Republic series, which is written by Kevin Scott, who has created other Star Wars content. And that's been a really, really cool story that's centered on what I'm starting to think might be one of the Jedi who leads to the downfall of the Jedi. And we're starting to see, I think, a little bit of that in some recent issues. And that's been really cool because we've gotten to meet new villains along the way, heroes who are sort of on the brink, and so on. I also started covering this brand new Marquis on Row series.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we got to see the origin story, or at least a big part of the origin story in this in issue number 1, which just came out, I think, last week.
Mm-hmm.
So really, really cool stuff there. And you've been covering the High Republic Adventures, which has
Yep.
some of my favorite characters of the new Star Wars, like of this High Republic era, are Daniel Jose Older characters in that
Yeah.
series.
Lula and Zine, that sisterhood. It's been fantastic to cover that one, and then Zine, her conflicted relationship with Crick. So this last one really kind of shifted everything into overdrive, and I feel like it kind of helped go back to the beginning, the issues 1 and 2, I think, where we started to see this rift form between Crix and Zine, and everything that all the issues that it created, like we're circling back around and maybe can resolve some of those.
Yep.
I don't have too much hope. I mean, this is the High Republic, and we've been punched in the guts a lot. So
A
I'm not
lot.
I'm not going to maintain hope at the moment, but I'm excited for where they take the story. So yeah, and you mentioned the row. That's Soul, right?
Yeah, that's Charles Soule. That's right.
Okay, that's fantastic. I love that
Yeah.
first series. I feel like that's what we've been wanting since this all started. Like
Yeah.
getting a little bit more backstory on him, who this guy is, where he comes from, what race of people he comes from, and who they are. Like you start getting a little bit more of that. You get the art of the characters we've been hearing from the books, whether that's uh I think Zetar was in this last Marvel issue. You have
Yes.
uh all of the henchmen. We've been getting Lorna D as part of the Marvel series as well, but this one also gets you Tempest runners that
Yes.
are attached to the storm that report to the eye report whatever
Yeah.
so.
And
Yeah,
others like I've really enjoyed reading about some of the Hutt cartel members who are new
yeah,
in the High Republic series,
yeah,
riding into battle with their rancors and things like that. And so
yes,
just that line right there, if you haven't read some of these comics, clearly you're missing out because there are Hutts riding rancors into battle.
right. And you don't want to miss that. Totally
No.
don't want to miss that. Yeah, so make sure you go check those out. I mean, we're covering the High Republic because I think they're great. I think they're great stories. I'm almost done with the Kevin Scott High Republic book, and it's fantastic stuff. It's great writing and it's great storytelling. So
Yeah, and
definitely loving it.
we're a year into the High Republic
Yep.
comics at this point. Um,
Yeah.
and so yeah, we're starting to get like the Marvel one that just came out was the Captain Scott one was issue 13. So if you want to binge at this point, if you want to get started, like you can really dig into it and sort of like when the Netflix series drops 12 episodes at once, you can just tear through it. It's all
Yeah.
really good stuff. So if you're
This is a
joining
great
now,
time for that.
you're not too late. You can just enjoy it and binge it.
Yeah, exactly. Um, all right. I think that covers our first segment,
That's the
right?
news.
What's
Maybe
our second segment called?
maybe
What?
that'll be the jingle for ending the news for
That's the
That's
news.
the news.
That'll be the sign to move on. You just like one of us will be like, "That's the news."
Right, yeah, right in the middle of me
We've hit the
talking
mark.
about something.
Exactly. Um, all right. What is our next segment called? I forget. Let's do it.
More to the story.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yes.
I need to come up with something better.
That's pretty good.
Okay, we'll stick with it. Um, well, we did get more to the story these past 2 weeks on the
Mm-hmm.
Book of Boba Fett, and it is progressing very nicely, in my not so humble opinion. There have been a plethora of opinions out there. Not so much on this episode 4, I feel like. I just didn't take to Twitter to see what everyone was saying as much, but I didn't feel like there was anything as controversial with this episode. The third one?
This one, sorry to interrupt. I was very
No, no.
surprised by this. This one is the highest rated one so far. If you look at Rotten Tomatoes,
Hmm.
Metacritic, all that stuff, it's been a zigzag, and this one is like a few points higher than Chapter 2, which was previously everybody's fave.
I have a theory of why that could be,
Okay.
and I think it's because everyone was going, "Why does he need the back to tank? Why is he turning so soft? Why is he like this isn't my Boba?" All that kind of rant, and this one actually helped to resolve some of those things to say, "This is why he is going the direction he's going in. This is why he needs the back to tank." Oh, and guess what? He's still a little anti-hero. He
Yeah.
can do some questionable revenge like things, hence why we call this one the Revenge of the Fett. Um, so I think it just really helped to establish what it's set up so far, and that's
Yep.
my theory.
Yeah. I'm along with you for that ride. But let's talk a little bit about the episodes here. So we have chapters 3 and chapter 4. Um, still not 100% clear on the naming convention, by the way. So it's the
How
book,
so?
and we're talking about each of these as being chapters from the book. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but there is no actual physical book or something like that. And uh, I'm thinking to another movie maker who I really like, Wes Anderson, and a lot of his movies are basically focused on a certain type of media, and it like really shows up that way. Like he made a movie in the late 90s called Rushmore, and the movie kind of runs like a play, and in between different parts of the movie there is actually a curtain that like lifts up and reveals the next scene and things like that. And then you had another movie that was like a book, and like as the story progresses, like the book opens up and you see different chapters and things like that. So that's kind of where my mind went when I saw it was Book of Boba Fett, and the first episode is called Chapter 1, things like that. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but strictly speaking, no actual book yet. But
it, it's a lot of story though. I
it's
will say, and that's the
so
thought I've
that's what
had.
it
Like
is. It's a
because of the
figurative book.
flashbacks.
Yes.
Yes. But they're covering a lot of timeline here and giving you a lot of great detail
Oh yeah.
of what's happened since everything that happened on Tatooine and Return of the Jedi all the way up to present day. So, and like we're
Hmm.
covering like 5 years of time in a very short period in 7 episodes.
Yep.
So there is something to be said about that.
Yeah.
Um, but this first one that we'll cover, the Streets of Mos Espa.
Yep.
Uh, I This one was an interesting one. It was one of the lower rated ones on IMDb, the lowest of the four so far. Um, but I thought was full of a lot of great stuff. Like even though there was a lot for people to complain about, if you just sit back and take it out of context, maybe you could see why people didn't like it so much. But within the context, especially that's set up in episode 4 or chapter 4,
Yeah.
it's actually really important in establishing the conflict that
Yes.
is ahead and the the defining moment of the Tusken Raiders in his life. So, which we'll get to in a second.
Oh yeah.
Um, but we start out with I laughed. Red Stapler guy. I don't know
Hmm.
what to
Yes.
call him other than that. Um, but he comes in, and the real big theme of that first piece of it is what kind of leader is Boba Fett going to be? Um, is and they talk about that like everyone's waiting to see what you're gonna do, how you're gonna lead, how they're gonna respond, and it kind of reminded me like. I mean, you and I are in business. Like when a new CEO comes into a company,
Yeah.
everyone's like kind of waiting. What is he or she going to establish as their style, as their MO? And
Yeah.
you see when you see that transition period happen from one to another, like the baton handing, whether it's in this case because Boba Fett came in and said, "Your time's up, my turn." Um, there is a little bit of that redefining power and style, and I feel like that's what this first bit stood up and reminded you of is like we're still waiting to see what kind of leader Boba Fett's going to be.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I think what we find out is he's not necessarily the type of leader that people expected.
Right.
So when the monger Lortha Peel is the character's name, approaches him, he doesn't do it entirely in a deferential way. He says some of the right stuff. Like he
Does
approaches.
he?
I think he approaches with like a little bit of the right posture of, I'm humbly asking you, but then he hits you with the, well, nobody respects you.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm
and so,
insulted on your behalf.
right. So that's a pretty open dig right there. Um,
Uh-huh.
and so when Boba Fett sort of goes, all right, yeah, I'm going to look into this for you. After that guy says something like that and his head doesn't roll and he doesn't end up in the rancor pit. I think that guy probably walks out going, who's this guy?
Yeah.
Like he's going to be another pushover, like the Fortuna maybe. But then what does he do? He goes out and runs into the cyborg gang or whatever people are calling them.
I've heard them say a few different things. The mods was what stood out in the next chapter, Gathering
Yep,
Storm. So let's call them the mods. I like that term.
the mods. Um, so he runs into all of them and then does something that neither the mods nor Lord Appeal expected, which is, he
Hmm.
freaks out at the price of water. He's ripping people off, he's gouging people, and he decides to hire these kids who are otherwise unemployed. So like nobody saw that coming. And to me, like that was just like a doubly smart move because the watermonger did not show him the appropriate level of respect, and therefore he kind of got what he gave out in terms of like um, that lack of respect and that just that bad vibe and that energy. And for somebody who's trying to consolidate power, you can't be super choosy when you're trying to find people to back you up on the street. And it seems like these guys have the pulse on the street. So,
Yeah.
I thought that was a clever move. And by the way, quick aside, I think the mods, that whole thing, I think is a play on, I think a lot of people on Twitter have picked up on this. The band, legendary rock band, The Who, had an album called Quadrophenia, and a big part of it was these teenage British kids on scooters who called themselves the mods, running around and getting into fights and causing trouble because they had no work and nothing else to do. So
Hmm.
I think that John Favreau is probably a fan of legendary British rock band The Who and maybe saw that movie or something and decided to,
Very
yeah,
interesting. Great
yep.
connection.
And
I
and
didn't know
and
that.
and they don't ride Vespas. They ride the Vespa competitor Lambretta scooters, which just a different brand. But they're covered in all those mirrors, and some
Yeah,
of them are like candy colored, which I know that we can get into that. A lot of people felt strongly about, but yeah, I think it's a direct homage to all of that. And he takes the mod thing, to the next level, and that they're modified in some way.
yeah. Well, I mean, let's just get to that now, because everyone did kind of freak out, and I admit, like, it does stick out. Like, what are these colorful Easter egg colored Vespas doing
Yeah,
in Star Wars on Tatooine? Now, if that
yeah,
was on Naboo, if that was on
yeah,
Coruscant, maybe nobody freaks out. Maybe nobody
yeah.
goes crazy. I mean, because we've gotten those kind of things on those planets before, and so it kind of
Yes,
fits into the vibe of that place,
fits
and
in.
you get it because that's also where you kind of a lot of wealth is, and this is kind of a symbol of that. But these aren't wealthy. These are work from the workers district. They're not wealthy and things like so. Why are they driving around in this? But then they kind of established this new coming group, the mods, and what their focus is. They love art and they love uh, droids and they love making themselves look cool and stuff like
Hmm.
that's their focus. I kind of thought about a group of people who may not have the most luxurious life, but this is what matters most to them. And we can
Yeah,
probably point to a lot of groups even in our galaxy that are like that,
yeah.
where you know maybe they don't have the greatest house, but that tattoo is really cool. Or something like that. Like
Something
that's
like
what
that.
matters to them. I thought
Yeah.
of tattoos a lot with this group.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, a different type of body modification, but
Yeah,
um, a quick plug to our friends at Fulcrum Entertainment who had us on. I think
yeah,
it was 2 weeks ago now to talk about Chapter Two. Um, and I went back and I watched. They had Salacious Rum on there, um, who is a quacky monkey lizard who does the whole podcasting character. It was amazing.
yeah.
But they were talking about the Streets of Mos Espa, Chapter Three, and I thought Harrison from Fulcrum Entertainment brought up a really really good point, which was if you've ever lived like in the middle of nowhere and or in a small town that's sort of boring, you probably, especially if you were younger, you probably knew some people who looked, dressed, and acted as if they were not in that place. So somebody like kids who dressed like really flamboyantly or, had
Yeah.
a, fluorescent red mohawk or something like that. And you pan out a little bit and you're like, oh, you're in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma. Like there's nothing going on here. Um, so
You're friends with a guy named what's his name?
Randy,
Randy.
Randy,
We
Randy
haven't
from
talked
Pet
about Randy in a
Boys.
while.
Nope, he's back. Oh, he's all over Reddit and Twitter complaining about this episode.
This episode is his field day.
Yes. For those of you who are new to the podcast, Randy is a made up character who represents the fandom menace, and his only personality trait is that he is mad about all the new Star Wars stuff. And
Yeah,
so when we make fun of people, which look, people are entitled to their opinions. I think the thing that
totally.
we get annoyed is when people tell us that we should not enjoy something about Star Wars because it's not cool enough or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, but
Honestly,
anyway,
it's more just in a bit of fun, but
it's just in a bit of fun. It's in a bit of fun. But going back to Harrison's point, I thought he made a really good point that, there are some people who kind of reject where they are. And Mos Espa seems like not a super cool. Mos Espa is not those other places that you named. It's not Coruscant. It's not the center of the universe. And so these guys maybe don't have the means to get off world and go somewhere cooler, but maybe they have the means to be able to afford a cool scooter and maybe some body modifications. And so that's how they kind of take themselves out of the boredom of where they are.
yeah, and stealing water when it's overpriced too. Which was the best part about that whole scene was uh, Boba taking a stand and saying, you know what, I'm not going to fight you just because this guy came and said that, I should rid you
Yeah,
from the seats. I'm going to come in and make my own judgment call. And he, in my opinion, he makes the right one. He gets one of the biggest things we're talking about. Like, how is he trying to create a power, this powerful empire and family with nobody? Like,
yeah,
he's got to attract some people. And he finds his opportunity to do that. He's like, I like the way you talk. And they kind of taken it back at first, like, oh, you're not here to kill us and to enforce it and tell us what we did was wrong. You're here to say good job, actually, and to give us a job and to have us back up our talk. sounds good. Like they get on board pretty quickly, but because Boba Fett was so convincing in the way that he delivered that,
Yeah,
and the way that he stood up to the guy, and realizing like he's not just going to be here and say like, oh, because you're a business with me, like, yeah, I'm just going to let you do whatever you want, charge him 1,300, I don't care. Like,
yeah,
no, I'm not all for that. Like, be fair, don't be a jerk, keep the street safe, keep the business running, do it right though. Like,
yeah,
I like that. I he's establishing the type of leader. Again, what's the point of this whole bit? Establishing the kind of leader he's going to be.
yeah, yeah. And a lot of what we saw really early on, maybe even in one of the trailers, I can't recall now, but he said something like, "I intend to rule with respect,"
Yep,
and
and we're seeing that.
that that's not just from him to each person he interacts with, but I think he's trying to enforce that between people. Like
Yeah,
Watermonger, you can't rip those guys off,
yeah,
or they're going to steal from you. They should pay you back a little bit, but not what you want because that is ripping them off.
yeah,
Um, so I think that's setting a tone, like you said.
yeah. And we see it again later on. We'll jump to this real quick and then jump back. But we see this with Black Chrysanthemum, which comes in, fights them.
Hmm.
He loses, right? He gets trapped. Um, the muscle that he's hired is obviously paid off in that moment. And later on when the Huts come back, they let Black Chrysanthemum go. And he says, "No hard feelings. It's business." And he gives him a little advice from one bounty hunter to the other. Like he is earning everyone's respect, no matter where he goes or what they've done or what
Yeah.
he does. Like,
Yep.
his focus is on respect, and you see that theme playing out from the beginning. So it's not just a throwaway line; it's like a theme that's been weaved through every episode so far, which I like.
Yeah. And his approach to it, though, I think visually, he's cutting people a break. He's trying to lead with respect, but he's always got his armor on. He's always got his blaster in his hand.
Yeah,
Like it's always maybe a second away from like descending into them fighting and whatever. And so I think that threat makes sure, like, just that threat being there, I think ensures that people don't step all over him just
yeah,
because he's in air quotes being nice.
yeah.
Um,
She's not. He's
he's still acting in his own self-interest, and he's still
hmm
trying to act in a way to get away from working for dumb people.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, let's talk a little bit about, unfortunately and sadly, what happens to the
yes.
Tusken Raiders in this episode. One of the, just another thing that I think Harrison from Fulcrum Entertainment predicted, but I think a lot of us hoped that he was wrong. So what happens to those poor guys?
Gosh, the worst. And I watched that, and my gut just dropped out of me.
Yeah.
Um, I I guess I didn't see it coming. I was hoping for something a little bit different.
Yep.
I was hoping it was like, hey, I've got some work to do to continue, pursuing your self-interest and things like that.
Yeah.
Uh, and and he leaves amicably with the effort, with the point being like he's going to focus on, no, this becomes more of a character defining moment for him.
Oh,
Um,
totally.
and I guess I was watching this, and I will admit I was a bit angry at Boba Fett. I
Yeah.
was I wasn't like um mad in the sense like it's irredeemable, you've done something terrible, but it's almost like not seeing how standing up to the Pikes in this case, and he didn't know at first that they were Pikes probably, but that in doing the train heist, it led to their
Yes.
demise, you know.
Yeah.
Um, so I think that that was like, yeah, a little bit of anger, but it was mostly just you feel for the Tuscans now. And I juxtapose two things, and I want your reaction to this. Um, this is a complete 180 from the massacre we've seen of Tuscan Raiders in the past in Attack of the Clones.
That's a great point. I didn't even think of that. Yeah, I mean, you feel completely differently seeing
You
this.
do. You
Oh,
you didn't see the aftermath of the first one, but you
yep.
heard it. You
Yeah.
knew what happened, and
And
the
that
way
that
that
was that was enough.
it was dark, it
Yeah.
was hurtful, but you didn't feel for the Tuscan Raiders. You kind of like, yeah, but it's just Tuscans. This is
You
more
didn't
about
see
Anakin.
the child-sized gaffy stick getting put on the funeral
No,
pyre or anything like that.
no, you didn't, and you were meant to still kind of not like them then because they had captured Shmi and
Yeah.
she died. And like there was a ton of reasons to not like them. In this one, you're made to feel completely different. You see the child, and you know that a child was killed as part of this, even though it was
Yeah.
said before. You see it
Right.
now.
Right.
A woman was killed, right? You hear about it before. You see it now. Um, the leader, everyone, like you had a connection with these people now, and it felt
Yeah.
worse.
Yeah.
So I love the 180 that they did and how they made you feel different about it this time around.
Yeah. Yeah. And the one of the things that I expected to see more of that we didn't get was I thought that Boba would be kicking himself for what happened. I thought he'd be like, just beside himself for the fact that he brought trouble to the Tuscan camp. Like that, he was trying to help, and he did help. He helped eliminate that train and hopefully struck a deal with the Pikes. So he thought at the time. Um,
Hmm.
but if he had not done that, they would all be alive. So I just kind of wondered
Yeah.
why we didn't see more of him, like, writhing on the ground in guilt.
Um, I that would be, but that would have been a bit out of character for me. Um, I think he's seen
That's
enough in
fair.
life. He
Yeah, that's
knows
fair.
the suffering of others. He's seen it. He's caused it. He's he's not that kind of person. He gets
Yep.
it. It's eating him up. He becomes a vagabond in the desert, and we see that in the next episode. Um, like, because think about it, for starters, the time frame of when all this happens. We don't know how long he was with the Tuscans, but keep in mind, like this starts like right at the end of the Return of the Jedi, right?
Yep.
In chapter one. And by chapter four, now we're right in the timeline of the Mandalorian series, which we know is what, 4 or 5 years
Yeah.
after Return of the Jedi.
Right.
There's a big time coverage in these few episodes. And I would believe that chapters one and two are probably the first year, you know? And then chapter three is somewhere still within that year. So between chapters three and four, at
Mm,
least in this flashback, is a long time. He's been a vagabond in the desert for a long time, and this is not sitting well with him. He is
yeah.
not happy with this. He has scores to settle, as we'll talk about later. So,
Yeah.
um, I think that there is uh, a bit of angst and annoyance and guilt and all that that is festering in him after this, and we do see a little bit of that aftermath when he, again in chapter four, when he's having some conversations with Fennec Shand, that this isn't settling well with him. So yeah, he didn't react in that way. I think you saw like a zoom when he was uh when he was cleaning up the mess, as we'll say. He had
Yep.
some uh, tears in his eyes, but you could see it was just mostly
Yeah.
anger and guilt that were swelling up.
Yeah.
So it's there.
It's there. That's fair. And then, as if that isn't bad enough, he's awoken from his back to tank dream slash flashback by who ripping him out of the tank.
Black Chrysanthemum. We knew it was coming, but
Yep.
how it would come was interesting. That was a great fight. It was uh, gritty.
It was very gritty. It was a little bit dark. A good question that some people raised out in the interwebs was how did Black Chrysanthemum get all the way to him? How did he get all the way to the back to tank? Wasn't Fennec Shand keeping an eye out? Weren't the
Maybe.
Gamorreans keeping an eye out?
I
Like what?
mean, nighttime black fur kind of blends in. Like
He slipped
uh,
through.
he's good at what he does. So just as good as Fennec Shand is, like he's just as good too. So uh, admirable match. But yeah, it's a good question. He slips by everybody. But at nighttime is like whoever is on guard is usually tired anyway. So like there's
that's
there's opportunity galore.
that's true. Yeah, a lot of people are trying to read a lot into that. Maybe there's something to it, but at the same time, like you said, we have to give him credit. Like supposedly he is an extraordinary bounty hunter. Like he
Yeah,
can find a way in to get to his target. So
yeah, totally.
um, yeah, really good kind of uh, fast. Remember, this is a Robert Rodriguez
Yep,
episode, so he's known for his action. He delivers in this fight scene, and we get another really good kind of like respectful Boba moment when one of his Gamorrean guards is hurt pretty badly, and he says, "Get him to my back to tank." And he
hmm,
shares, even though he himself is injured, he gives up his seat in the back to tank for his loyal guard.
that's true. Yeah, um, very good point. I haven't even thought of that. Um, I think the more interesting parts of the scene was, it's a great fighting sequence, and we see Black Krrsantan, and he's trapped, and in the Rancor pit, and then eventually he's let go once the Hutts come back and say,
Yes.
"Hey, we're sorry, we got some peace offerings." You see the Hutts do what they do best, which is like, "We
Yeah.
tried to kill you, but we're sorry. Here's our peace offering. It's a pretty good one, so all right, we'll call it even. No hard feelings, things like that. You were just doing your job." Um, I found it interesting. I love their line, "We don't want war, it's bad for business,"
Yeah.
which
That's
makes
not,
me
they've said it
laugh.
multiple times.
They have. It makes me laugh for two reasons. One, like, we're the bounty hunters. We see the Hutts kind of get thick. I think they learned their lesson from that, is what my guess is.
Hmm.
Like,
Hmm.
war is bad for business, and we've already learned that. So that was one thought, like, tie back to that series. But then specifically, like, this is Star Wars. Wars are what this whole thing is known for.
That's what it's all about. And I was thinking too about in the Last Jedi when we go to Canto Bight, and there's all the war profiteers. Like
Yeah,
war is a business. It's not. It's maybe it's bad for some
it's
businesses, but it is a business.
it's bad for the Hutts business.
It's bad for the
It's
Hutt's business.
yeah.
Yeah.
It
So
it's just not good. And so they're like, we're out of here. We're done with this. The Pikes, we don't want to pick any fights with them. We want to keep things like they're a big power syndicate. We're a big power syndicate, and we've had some
yes.
struggles as of late. So we're not going to pick this fight. Um, so that was interesting. But I think the more interesting part was the Huts bring a gift, the Rancor,
Yep.
and we learned a lot about Rancors.
We do. And we learn a lot of that also from Danny Trejo, who makes his
Yes.
first appearance in Star Wars, which a lot of people were really excited about. But
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. What do you think of like the Hutt delivery scene? I thought the Hutt was so subdued, and I wondered if
The
is
Rancor, you
that
mean?
or
The
the
Rancor
Rancor?
was
I'm
subdued?
sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought the Rancor was subdued. Is that like is that going to be three times its size when it gets full grown? Things like
Oh,
that. Like
totally.
lots of questions. But forget what Fennec Shan says. Oh, that's quite a
It's
gift,
quite a gift. Yeah.
and it sure is.
It is. I mean, we know the power of a rancor. I mean, we saw what rancors can do. Like, they can get people talking,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Just the threat of them is
Yes.
scary, even if you're the type that would normally hold your tongue or be really
Yep.
good at it. Uh, so yeah, I mean, it is quite the gift. I mean, they talk about how it's still a calf, so it's not really aggressive yet. Um, but even just the fact that, I mean, Danny Trejo gets the opportunity to deliver a lot of these teachings, which is great. But uh, the fact that they're loving creatures. Have you ever looked at a rancor like as a loving creature?
Absolutely not. And then it makes me feel really bad because I guess they've been abused and portrayed differently. And so, like now,
Yeah,
you think back to the Rancor Keeper in the original trilogy and how sad he is when Luke kills his Rancor, and maybe it makes a little bit more sense. Maybe that guy experienced that love from Batista, the Potato Bear Rancor.
yeah. You feel it's not just like, I really like this violent thing. Like, maybe that was the guy that the rancor had bonded with,
Yes,
right?
exactly, right.
Batista specifically. So
Batista.
uh, yeah, the fact that we'll now look at them as loving creatures, not just great fighters, which they mentioned, and the whole like idea of imprinting on the first, I don't know if it was
Yeah,
human or like life form that he sees, but how important that is.
yeah.
Um,
And then they do the reveal. I thought was really good because I think I didn't really catch up until that moment that the Rancor had a blinder on, and then
yeah,
Danny Trejo peels it off, and the little beady eyes start blinking. That was a really really kind of cool moment, and had no idea that was a thing, the
yeah,
imprinting thing.
yeah. I like it personally, and it's a way to say, hey, let's. This is Favreau and Filoni's way of saying, let's take what we've got and build on it.
Yeah,
And I love this, and specifically, we get this a little bit more with the next episode we'll talk about in just a second, but I learned something about Boba Fett. You see how his demeanor changes with animals like the Rancor? He
yeah.
becomes a bit of a
And the
softie,
and the bantha.
and the Bantha, right?
I think that's a thing that was in the TV show The Sopranos. Was there's a couple things where Tony Soprano, who is the crime boss, just loves animals, like loves a racehorse at one point and things
Yeah,
like that, and just really respects majestic, bits of nature and things like that. But
Yeah,
then we'll go, and crush people's skulls and whatever.
totally. But I think there's something there about him, about both that we learned, that he's an animal lover, first of all, and he has a lot more respect and tolerance for them than he does people. He does not treat people the same way.
Right, right. And I think, it's because I think he doesn't care for overly complicated relationships, things like that. And animals have a nice way of simplifying things. So when an animal likes you, it's pretty
Yeah,
uncomplicated. They don't necessarily want anything from you. They just kind of like you.
yeah.
Um, so I think he recognizes some of that. But yeah, and then where else does this episode take us?
So the street chase,
Oh yeah, the
that's
street
the next
chase,
part.
which yeah, a lot of people had a meltdown about that. We hope that they're all doing okay.
Randy, we hope you're doing all right. Really, we do. Um, all right, so here are a few thoughts that I have on this. Yes,
Okay.
it was slower. I agree. There were moments where it was a little underwhelming. Was it completely enough to take you out? In moments. Uh,
Yeah.
does it make it bad? No. My thought is that this might be a limitation of the volume where they're filming these. And I think that's whether this was filmed. I don't know if this was practical or anything, but
Yes.
I think that's part of this.
I that makes a ton of sense. Yeah, because you don't like the volume is big, but it's not that big. You can't have a full car chase in it.
Right. So if that's the case, then we just may need it's a learning for them. Like this is new technology. They may go, ooh, if we're gonna do chases with this and this is what it's gonna look like, maybe we don't want to do this in the volume. Maybe we want to go for
Yeah.
practical if we can. But this
Yep.
is post-pandemic world, so this might be the best that they can do with for the moment. I don't know.
Yeah.
But that was one thought I had. Other than that, I mean, it was nice to see the Vespa gang in action and see what they can pull off, and to see like what
Yeah.
the mods are capable of, and the modifications
Yes.
they do to themselves.
Yeah, and the other thing that it kind of stood out to me from the chase scene is if we go back to the back to tank when Black Chrysanthemum pulls Boba out, the mods do come to his rescue. The mods try to surround Black
Yeah.
Chrysanthemum and capture him and save the day. So after that moment, you're kind of rooting for them. Like they
Hmm.
showed up for Boba Fett in a way where
Yeah.
they put themselves at risk. Um, so then all of a sudden it's like, yeah, these are our guys,
Yeah.
and okay, like they're colorful and they're not super fast.
Yeah.
Um, but like I I can move on from that. I'm not super stressed out about that.
Me neither. Again, I think there were still some great moments in it where you could tell it was going fast if you really, and they did a lot of like slow mo stuff as part of it too. So you
Yeah,
got to make sure you discern between like what's real time speed and slow mo, because like when he rams into the water tower, that's a little that slows down to kind of show the effect a little bit. So just keep that in mind.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
but there were a ton of Easter eggs in this too. Tons. My favorite being there were astromech droids, there were pit droids, there were protocol droids, but the Jabba painting was the coolest because
That
that
they
was
drove
Ralph
through.
McQuarrie's concept art.
No
Yeah,
way. Oh, I didn't know that. Oh man, that's such a good one. That's
yeah,
such a
it's a
good
really
one.
good one.
I got to go back
Um,
and watch it and like do like a frame by frame if I can. That's so cool.
yeah, that one was a really good one.
I'm
Um,
sure. I'm sure you can now buy that poster in Galaxy's Edge for $300 or whatever.
Probably, or at least a print of it that's 8 by 12.
A print. A print. Yep. Yep.
12 by 8 by I don't know. Anyway, let's because I know we're a little pressed for time, so let's move on to the next episode unless you got anything to cover on this one again.
I'll just say it's interesting how quickly the Major Domo gives up the mayor, and then we know that Mokshaiz is working with the Pikes, and
Yeah,
that kind of
yeah.
that paints the picture for Boba Fett. He knows who he's got to go after, and he knows where he's got to go next.
Well, and at the same time, he knew that would be his toughest score to settle, and we're getting ahead to the next episode, but like he talked about
Yeah.
scores to settle, that's his biggest one, and that will be his
Yep.
hardest one to settle. So
Yeah.
uh, he's all. I think there's parts of him that's like, oh, great, I'm getting in with the Pikes, but then he's like, good, I'm getting in with the Pikes. I've got a score to settle.
Yep.
So that's going to be good to
Yeah.
see. The Gathering Storm is the next episode. So
Yes.
where do we start with this one?
If I'm not mistaken, we start in the back to tank, and we start in
Yep.
flashback, and we go back to, if you remember from the second season of The Mandalorian, where Boba Fett shows up, he does show up with his original ship that we get to see all those years ago, and there's the question of how does he get it back? And so part of this is um, him rescuing Fennec Shand, taking her to the mods. She becomes a mod,
Hmm.
and then they go and get his ship back. And that's a core part of the episode. Is Boba Fett is associated with his ship and with his armor. And this episode is kind of about him like reassembling all those things that make him Boba Fett, at least visually.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. This is where I think we get the biggest time jump that I mentioned,
Mm-hmm.
where he's been a vagabond for a while. He's been
Yep.
letting all this guilt fester, and I think he comes across Fennec Shannon. I think he recognizes her
Yeah.
personally because they were bounty hunters, both of them, independent ones. You know your competition. You know your friend who you're.
Especially the best ones. You know who they are.
Yes, exactly. So I think he recognizes her, and so he instantly realizes, hey, she can help me if I save her.
Yes. If I
So
save her.
there's something in it for him to do that.
Yep. Yep.
It's not just motivated by altruism.
Yep. That's a good point. But everybody wins because she gets to live. And she gets this really interesting modification that we got to see in the season 2 of The Mandalorian, and
Hmm.
all the different gears and things like that in her stomach. And I thought it was really interesting when the guy who does the mods, I don't know what you would call him, like the engineer slash doctor guy. Um, I thought it was really interesting when Boba Fett asks if he's going to close her up. And he's like,
Yeah,
why would I cover up this beautiful work?
yeah,
It's like these modifications are going back to our last episode where we were talking about the mods and how some of it looked a little bit silly to people, I guess, but it's a status symbol. It is a
hmm,
cool thing that you've invested in. And one of the characters, I think in this episode, Boba Fett asks one of the mods, like, keep your eye out. And that mod happens to have a modified eye, and he's like, "Yeah, I paid a lot of money for this. Like,
yeah.
I'm proud of it." So,
That was the
um,
very end of the Streets of Mos Espa. Yes,
yes, and so to me, like that was, I guess the assumption was like, "Hey, I'm not covering up my terrific work that I've done on this bounty hunter."
right.
So that was kind of an interesting little twist. Uh, but the what did you think of the scene of them kind of working their way through Jabba's palace to get to his ship and get through all the guards and so on?
Well, yeah, I'll answer your question in a second, but one last thing on that with the remember earlier I was saying like the tattoos, like this kind
Yes.
of reminds me of tattoos. This was
Yeah.
called the mod parlor, and you usually hear the term tattoo
That
parlor,
two
right? So
parlor.
like this
You're totally right.
this is where I think they're taking inspiration from that a
Yes.
bit and saying like let's kind of what would that version of like tattooing be
Yeah.
in Star Wars, modifying yourself. And so I
Very good
think that's a
call.
really cool thing to kind of relate it there. But to no, to answer your question, yeah, because that's the next part of this is like the whole recovering Boba's ship. It's a great scene. You know, the action. I love the little ball that they had to like that Fennec had to survey the
Yes. That
inside of the.
scans everything. Yep.
Yeah, that was cool. But even better than that um, was again, this is where we see like his connection with the animals, like with the bantha, like go make baby banthas, he says. um,
There's a good bantha line almost every episode.
yeah, totally, yeah. But we get a tiny little bit of insight too about um, the grief that he has from the Tuscan
Yeah.
massacre, and she's willing to help him to pay off their debt, her debt at first is what
Yeah.
how she thinks about it.
Yep.
Um, but I guess the thought I had was great. We're finally going to see him reunited with his ship, but it's more important that after 3-4 years of letting this grief fester, Fennec Shand is his way to get his revenge,
Yes.
to start settling the scores that exist, and so he finally gets his chance to get his ship back. But it's not about the ship; it's about the scores that he wants to settle.
I think it's about the scores, and I think it's about like his identity, because I think
Yeah.
Like I said, I think his armor and I think his ship sort of helped define him and defined, and I guess like in a past tense too, like they defined him as a bounty hunter.
Mm.
And I think I don't think that he at that point in time wants to necessarily go back to bounty hunting, but he wants to kind of get back some of his mojo that he lost when they took the armor when
Yeah.
his ship was taken away.
Yeah.
Some people complain that the fight scenes throughout Jabba's palace were like a little bit Disney, especially like in when they were fighting in the kitchen. Um, I thought it was cool. I thought it was a cool place to have some combat with, the droid chopping everything up, and then the
Yeah.
chef droid turns into
Yes.
like a General Grievous with all the spinning blades and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I thought the little slippery like bunny droid guy was really good. I thought there was just like some really good kind of like some silly stuff on top of like some really good action. And I also liked how the ship didn't just like naturally slip out of like the cargo bay and just fly away. Like it's
Hmm.
grinding against the walls and
Hmm.
crashing, and Boba can't see where he's going, and he can't shoot and whatever.
Yeah.
Like I thought that was like that added like a nice bit of tension and excitement to everything.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
and sometimes in some of the media that we enjoy, things go pretty smoothly for the heroes, but that's not the case here.
Heroes, using the term loosely, right?
Using the
Uh,
term loosely, yeah,
yeah, it kind of reminded me of like it's been a while since he's been on the bike,
yes,
and so there's a little bit of rust to shake off, and it's been a while since
yep.
he's flown his ship around. A little bit of rust to shake off, and just more than shaking, he grinds it against the walls, to
But
get it off.
but let's talk about the first thing he does when they're loose. Um, he blows up a biker gang, and
Yeah,
I guess that's them. I guess that's the ones that took out the Tusken Raider camp.
I think so. Yes,
I
um,
would assume.
but I mean, yes, like in the first, he's like step one, settle the score, and he knows that they're the easiest one to settle the score with. As soon as he's got a ship back, he can take them out. Um,
Yep.
and so the first thought I had was, well, I'll call him Randy, right?
Yeah.
Is this the Boba you wanted? Because this is the Boba you're getting. This is the your chance to see Boba be questionable, do stuff that is
Yep.
obviously the anti-hero. Um,
Yes.
he's killing him in cold blood.
Cold blood. Yep.
So,
Unremorseful.
uh-huh,
Not even just making sure he tries to get everybody. Like
yeah.
nobody gets away.
And then he
Um,
looks at Fennec Shannon and he's like, "You're cool with this, right? Because if not, I'm
yes.
throwing you out." And she's just like,
Right.
"I'm good with it. No problem."
And then immediately after that, we go over to the Sarlacc pit. And so I was watching this early in the morning, and I was kind of like rubbing my eyes, like half asleep. I assumed he was just going to blow up the Sarlacc pit. I forgot that, oh, he might think that his armor is in there. Like
Yeah.
I thought he was going to settle the score and just torch the Sarlacc pit too.
Well, I thought the
Um,
Sarlacc was dead, and I think he might have thought that too. So my question was more, why did he think that his armor was there to begin with? He must have forgot that he got out with the armor, and
he must have been
you
so
know,
dazed and so out of it, and he must have just blacked out. That he must have no memory of climbing out and then getting stripped off. So yeah, maybe he thought it was dead, and maybe he was just going there to kind of like kick sand in its dead eye or whatever. But
yeah, and just
um,
let me just double check that you didn't take this back. You
yeah,
know,
yeah, yeah. And there were some cool shots there of the way that the ship tipped forward, and they were like really sort of leaning in and
yeah.
peering around in there and stuff. I thought the seismic charge was some serious fan
Oh
service
yeah.
that none of us are upset about.
Nobody.
Um, but actually, I saw one guy online who said, and any fighter pilot would be really frustrated if they had to unbuckle out of their seat to use one of their weapons. And it's like, bro, how many fighter pilots do you know? Like, is this like a normal conversation that you have, or are you just a Randy sitting behind your keyboard saying stuff? Because Fennec Shan had to stand up and get out of her seat to hit the seismic charge button. Um, but that was for dramatic effect. It's a show.
Well, yes,
It
but
it was
also like,
exciting.
uh, maybe maybe Boba Fett could have reached it, and he's
Maybe
the
he could
pilot.
have. He's the pilot.
All right, I don't want
And
to even.
she made the call to do that. So
Yeah,
I know a lot of people were like, well, I don't know about
just
that. Um,
Just stop. That's where I'm like, all right, you're fine. You were stretching now. I
really, really
laughed.
stretching.
I laughed more at the, um, he doesn't even say thank you to Fennec Chan. He's just like, next time, don't touch my buttons. like, like, no, thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
He just, he just can't say anything nice. Apparently,
Yep.
doesn't matter
Yep.
what you do.
Yeah.
And so like this is where I thought like we're getting the Boba that everyone expected a bit more, and we're
Yeah.
still seeing that this is part of his character. It isn't left. We're also getting answers to why he still needs a back to thing because he went back into the Sarlacc pit and got all that acid on him. So
Yes.
there were some scars that he had to uh to heal there. We also
Yep.
understand why he's doing what he's doing, that he's like, I'm done with bounty, and he talks about this more earlier in the episode, like, I'm done with
Yeah.
bounty hunting. I don't want to be a hunter anymore. I want to stop working for idiots. I can do this better,
That's the big thing. Yep.
right? And then we fast forward again to this where um he's like, all right, Finnick, you're good at what you do. I need brains and muscle, and you've got both.
Yes. Yep.
And I can give you something everybody else can. You want your independence, sure, whatever, but I can give you loyalty and give you a cut in, and that's important. I think that's tempting for her. I wonder if that's enough, but it is
Yeah.
tempting for her.
Yes.
Um, but I thought the more interesting part was when Fennec says that being around the Tuscans has made him soft. Because
Mm.
and
Which is
all the
yeah.
fanboys and stuff were thinking that.
Yes.
And I
Yeah.
feel like Rodriguez is like, I know you're gonna think that, so I'm going to plant that and
Yep.
say you're wrong. And Boba Fett
Yeah.
gets the chance to say that. What do you think of that?
Yeah, and I thought that was a little bit wild too because to me, like they're like the toughest, hardiest people, in some parts of the galaxy. Like
Yeah,
you can't mess with the Tuscans. Like they're exposed to the elements in the desert, and they find a way to survive. And they're just to me, they're just tough as nails.
yeah,
Um, but I thought she had a point in that being accepted and being brought into what is essentially an extended family, I think does soften your heart a little bit, but it's still Boba Fett. And I think we're getting hints that he's going to act like Boba Fett and he's going to continue to be tough and now potentially vengeful.
vengeful. Like those pieces of who we know he is are still there. We
Yes.
saw that aplenty in this episode when he's fighting
Yep.
everybody. But then he still hasn't forgotten the lesson he learned from the Tuscans. And while
Yes.
Fennec thinks that's made him soft, he's there to correct her and be like, no, it's made me strong because I learned a valuable lesson. And I learned
Yep.
there is only so far you can get without a tribe. And so he's
Yeah.
learned that lesson. And that's the key here. I'm still that, that vengeful, it's just business, but
Mm-hmm.
I'll do whatever it takes. I'll
Well said.
kill in cold blood if I have to. But I have to have a tribe, and I
Yep.
cannot do what I want to do in leading with respect and doing better than what everyone else around me has done because everyone can't do it right, it seems. I can do
Yep.
it better as long as I get a tribe. And that lesson, I think, it was a lesson to everybody watching the show. Is like, before you judge me,
Mm-hmm.
realize I'm progressing here and I'm learning
Mm-hmm.
as I go. And I'm, I don't want to say like beyond your primitive ways because those are
Yeah.
still there.
Yeah.
But he's definitely going beyond and progressing as a character, which he
Yeah.
needs to.
Yeah.
That's what makes a good show.
I think I think you're right. And I think we're seeing it happen to others too. I think we're
Yeah,
seeing it. So I think Fennec is progressing. To jump ahead a little bit, Black Chrysanthemum is showing shades of the past.
yeah,
He still rips off the Trandoshan's arm. But it grows back,
oh
for
yeah,
Trandoshans. So
yeah,
he'll be
exactly.
okay.
Yeah,
Um, but then, I think he's also thinking like, all right, well, maybe things can be different for me. Maybe I can have a different employment situation.
yeah,
And then similarly, towards the end of the episode, we get the big kind of like summit when Boba
yeah,
Fett brings in all these different like neighborhood regional crime bosses and basically says like, maybe things can be a little bit different. Maybe we can come to an agreement. And
yeah,
they're all skeptical. And I thought that they played some of that stuff really well, but they are skeptical while being permissive. They're kind of like, okay, if this is what you want to do, we'll probably stay out of your way. So what did you think about the big summit scene with all the other guys?
I thought it was fantastic. look, the what I was just thinking of is like he's got the mods now.
Yep.
He's got the Rancors, or
Yes.
the Rancor, sorry. Uh, he's got Black Chrysanthemum, and the whole point of that scene was to show again Black Chrysanthemum where he is, to give you a little bit of his history and what kind of where he's coming from, but it was
Mm-hmm.
also to show you, where he comes in and says, yeah, you know what, I will work for you right now, Boba Fett, because I
Yep.
see an opportunity here. That's huge. And now he's got his biggest obstacle out of his way, and he's got the opportunity to kind of prove what he's worth with in fighting the Pikes. So I think it
And
was.
by the way, I think that's a perfect way to put it. Like, it would be great if they were all on his side,
Mhm.
but he will take them just sort of staying out of the way.
Yeah,
Like
yep,
that's a huge win.
it's huge. Um, and but I think that's like the progress he's made in establishing his
Yeah.
tribe. Like he's gotten some big
Right.
muscle on his side, and he knows that he doesn't have enough just yet. Um,
Yep.
but this scene is really about like getting everyone. He knows that they're gonna. He says pursue their own self interest,
Yep.
and he lets them do that, which is great because he still remains on top at the end of it all, knowing that it's rocky, but he gets the chance
Yep.
to prove himself without the threats anymore. I, so I think there's one more thing that we learned after the meeting,
Yes.
and that is he's got almost all the pieces that he needs, except he needs another missing piece. He's got all the credits in the world, but he needs muscle, and luckily, as
Mm-hmm.
Fennec reminds him, they can buy some muscle, and we don't get told what that muscle will be, but we get a clue, and it's a
Mm-hmm.
musical clue. And
Yes.
if you're good enough at picking up on those kind of cues, then you know where he could be going. And I say could be because maybe he's going after Din Djarin Mandalorian. Okay, so the cue is the Mandalorian music plays.
The theme, yeah,
The
the
theme,
motif or whatever they call it. Yeah.
yes. Is it Din Djarin Mandalorian? Is it Armorer and their group Mandalorians?
Yep. It could be
Is
John
it
Favreau and Mandalorian armor. Yep.
that would be great. I'd be there for that. Is it Bo-Katan? I don't think it's Bo-Katan. They've got some
I don't think so either. But yeah.
um you know issues.
Yep.
Uh, but who is it? We'll find out.
I think I'm hoping that we find out this week, but it could be a seed that they plant that doesn't that we don't see until there's only 3 episodes left. It might not come up this week, but I'm hoping that it does.
I'm hoping so too, and I'm hoping as Din Djarin. I think that would be great. I
I
think
mean, I hope so, but yeah, I don't know.
I think that's one way of Boba calling him up and saying, "Listen, remember that one time I helped you to get Grogu
Uh
back?
huh. Uh huh.
Yeah, I need you to come here now and help me
Yep.
get some people off my back, fight a war with
That
me."
would be awesome. But I feel like I haven't seen anything. Well, I don't. They're really good at keeping some of this stuff under wraps, but I haven't seen anything of like Pedro Pascal seen on Book of Boba Fett set, any of that stuff. But
We
that
just
doesn't mean anything.
we just watched Disney bring back Spider-Man from multiple
Yeah,
timelines and
and
do it
and
in
made it
great
work.
fashion. I know
Yep.
I didn't do a spoiler preview, but if you haven't seen that yet, it's been over a month, so I don't know. That's
Yep.
well out in the world now. But like
Yep.
they can do it. They
Yeah.
can get that without leaks coming out. And it's not that hard because I mean, he's already he could have just been saying I'm going to do some work for Mandalorian 3,
Yep.
season 3,
Yeah. Yeah.
So, or filmed it like well in advance and as part of season 2. So you never know.
That's another thing they could have done. That's a great point. Yep.
Yeah. Um, but anyway, no, this was a fantastic episode. I love what they set up. I love that they've closed off the past now, and so it looks like we're just going to be focused on the present. We got the backstory
Yep.
that we need, so let's tell you what happens after this as he establishes himself as the daimyo. Cannot wait for the next episodes because I love the direction they're taking with the character, with the show, with the conflict, with the
Yep.
Pikes, and
Oh
want to see
yes.
it all play out now.
Yep. Can't wait until Wednesday of next week.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Anything else that you want to say? Any parting words?
No, I'm excited to be back in a couple of weeks to talk about chapters 5 and 6, and then just after that we'll have the finale. So we're going to have a bunch of Book of Boba Fett talk coming up, and it's been a lot of fun. And we're, I guess, just at like the halfway point now, a little bit past the halfway point. So
Yeah.
I think this is where the pedal hits the metal. So I am pumped.
That's true. Yeah, we can't wait to cover the next couple episodes in 2 more weeks with everybody. This has been a great ride. We hope you're enjoying it with us. Um,
Yep.
Thank you for listening as always. Thank you for being here. Uh, thank you for your support. In whatever form that you've offered that. If you want to reach out and communicate and talk to us, we want to talk back. You can email us at the Starbros. What?
We do want to talk back. Yeah,
We do
reach
want to
out.
talk back. So reach out to us, Starbros Podcast. Sorry, let me say that slower. The Starbros Podcast at
Mm-hmm.
gmail.com. You
Mm-hmm.
can find us on Twitter at Starbros Podcast. You can find us on Facebook. Did I miss anything? Broaxium
Um,
YouTube channel.
the Broaxium YouTube channel. So as we mentioned earlier, we cover the High Republic comics, and there's a bunch of other awesome Star Wars stuff on there too. So don't miss that.
Do not miss that. And yeah, keep coming back for more. We're here every
Please.
other week.
Yep.
We love that you listen, and we want to talk to you, like we said. So thank you
Yes.
again. As always, we have to part by saying thank you. Um, I think there's one more thing that we do to part two.
I think there is one more thing. I think it's your turn to do the one more thing.
Yeah, yeah, it's my turn. I wonder how this will sound on these headphones. We'll find out. It's gonna sound like a tin can.
Give it
All
a
right,
whirl.
it's a wrap. The delayed laugh, man.